All right. I thought I could get it in one, but I am not going to get it in one. So I'll just tell you that right up front. We're going to talk about the temples built. And there were several things came up as I was putting this one together this morning. Several other things came up that I hadn't thought about at the time, but surprise, who knew? But we're going to talk. We talked last week about Absalom being the one, or excuse me, not Absalom. Let's try that again. We talked about Solomon being the one that was selected to build the temple, to build the house.
Yes.
Kind of. It sounded like Solomon was chosen of David's immediate sons. We're going to dig at that just a little bit deeper. So we're going to discuss the first temple being built, and we're primarily going to look at 1 Kings 8 and 2 Chronicles 7. But there are some other spots we're going to look at today. So we'll start out in 1 Kings 8. Next week we'll look at Ezra 3 because I want to discuss the second temple as well. Okay? Now we established last week that God told David a son from his own body would build the temple. And that promise has a double fulfillment. It was Solomon at the immediate time, and the second is Yeshua. He's building that temple with living stones right now. So let's pick up in Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 22, where we established that. It's just a couple of verses there. In 1 Chronicles 22:7, David said to Solomon, "My son, as for me, it was in my mind to build a house to the name of Yahweh my Elohim. But the word of Yah came to me, saying, You have shed much blood and have made great wars. You shall not build a house for my name, because you have shed much blood in my sight." Verse 9, "Behold, a son shall be born to you, who shall be a man of rest. I will give him rest from all his enemies around. His name shall be Solomon, for I will give peace and quietness to Israel in his days." Verse 10, "He shall build a house for my name, and he shall be my son, and I will be his father. And I will establish the throne of the kingdom over Israel forever." Now, I want you to notice a couple of things here. He shall be my son, and I will be his father, is what Yah said. Okay? That's an interesting little phrase. A couple phrases. I want you to hold on to those for later. We'll come back to those several times, in fact. Maybe not necessarily in this study, but we're going to come back to that. All right. Now I want to get a second witness of that from Chronicles 28. Then King David rose to his feet and said, "Hear me, my brethren and my people. I had it in my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of Yah and for the footstool of our God, and had made preparations to build it." Now I want you to understand something. You know there's many parallel passages many passages within Scripture that are parallel passages. Seldom are they exact. You can always pick up a little more information. The Gospels are that way. If you have different passages in the Gospel, you get a little bit from each writer based on the perspective that they're writing, or the crowd that they're writing to, or what the context is. Here we see David is building a house for the rest of the Ark of the Covenant, and as a footstool for Elohim. And verse 3 says, "But Elohim said to me, You shall not build a house for my name, because you have been a man of war and have shed blood." Verse 4, "However, Yahweh Elohim of Israel chose me, above all the house of my father, to be king over Israel forever. And he chose Judah to be a ruler, and the house of Judah, the house of my father, and among the sons of my father, he was pleased to make me king over all Israel. For those of you keeping track, we have seen this now. This line go from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? Judah. Now we're seeing David, and now it's Solomon. It gets narrower and narrower and narrower to who this promised one is. That's a spoiler alert. You already know who it is anyway, right? Okay, so verse 5. And of all my sons, for Yah has given me many sons, he has chosen my son Solomon to sit on the throne of my kingdom, or of the kingdom of Yahweh over Israel. Now, he said to me, it is your son Solomon who will build my house and my courts. For I have chosen him to be my son, and I will be his father. That was twice about Solomon. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Moreover, I will establish his kingdom forever. And I highlighted that next word in blue. If. Solomon's going to reign over his kingdom forever if he's steadfast to observe my commandments and my judgments as it is to this day. And we know what happened. Any of us that have read ahead know what happened. So there's two clear references to Solomon being chosen. Now let's pick up in 1 Kings chapter 8. So here he is, he's getting ready to kick in and apply all the materials that David had stored up for him and everything. So in verse 1, now Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief fathers and the children of Israel, to King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord from the city of David, which is in Zion. Therefore all the men of Israel assembled to King Solomon at the feast in the month of Ethanim, which is the 7th month. That's a different name we've had for the 7th month before. But what does the 7th month tell us? What's significant about that? It's not related to this study. I just want to bring it to your attention again. When you read these things, raise up a little flag. 7th month is, what happens in the 7th month?
We have 3 feasts.
Yeah, we do. Right?
Yom Teruah, Rosh Hashanah. Wait a minute. Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot.
Right. Okay. So verse 3. So all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark. And they brought up the ark of Yah, the tabernacle of meeting, the holy furnishings, and the tabernacle that were in the tabernacle. And the priests and the Levites brought them up. Verse 5. Also, King Solomon and all his congregation of Israel, who were assembled with him, were with him before the ark, sacrificing sheep and oxen that could not be counted or numbered for multitude. Then the priests brought in the ark of the covenant of Yah to its place, to the inner sanctuary of the temple, to the most holy place, under the wings of the cherubim. We're going to come back to that in just a second. For the cherubim spread their 2 wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubim overshadowed the ark and its poles. The poles extended so that the ends of the poles could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen from the outside. And they are there to this day. That's since changed. The day of the writing. Okay. All right. Nothing was in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there at Horeb, and Yah made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt. All right. I want to examine Solomon's cherubim for a couple of minutes. Actually, I want to examine this first temple. What is it that's what is it that Solomon is trying to do? He's trying to build this house, right? For the name of Yah, right? Why did he pick this format? Why did he choose to have a Holy of Holies?
He's trying to duplicate the tabernacle.
He's trying to duplicate the tabernacle, right? What is on its face value, what is the tabernacle? It's a mirror of what was in heaven that Moses was seeing, that saw, right? So he's trying to duplicate the replica that Moses made in the wilderness, okay? He's missing a couple of things. He's off just a skosh, okay, in a few areas. So I want to look at these cherubim. In verse 6 it says, inside the inner sanctuary he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. One wing of the cherub was 5 cubits, and the other wing was 5 cubits, 10 cubits from tip to tip, from one wing tip to the other. 1 Kings 6:25. And the other cherubim was 10 cubits. Both cherubim were the same size and shape. The height of the one was 10 cubits, so was the other. Verse 27. Then he set the cherubim inside the inner room, and they stretched out the wings of the cherubim so that the wing of one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other touched the other wall, and the wings touched each other in the middle of the room. Also, he overlaid the cherubim with gold. Does anybody recognize anything that might be a little bit off in what I've read so far?
And there's no mercy seat. There's no veil. And the cherubim were separate. They were part of the room, not part of the ark.
That's right. Solomon's cherubim were separate. We're going to go back and, in fact, let's do that now. Let's do that now, since I asked that question. Hold your finger where you're at and turn to Exodus chapter 37. And I want you to remember with me that Moses is doing what he was told and shown. Remember, Yah told him, you build this according to the pattern that I showed you. That's how I want you to build this. So in chapter 37, verses 1 through 9. Then Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood. 2.5 cubits was its length, 2.5 cubits was its width, and 1.5 cubits was its height. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and out, and made the molding of gold all around it. And he cast for it 4 rings of gold to be set on the 4 corners, 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. He made the poles of acacia wood, and he overlaid them with gold. And he put the poles into the rings at the sides of the ark to bear the ark. He also made a mercy seat. John mentioned that this was missing. Listen to this. This is important. He also made a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits was its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. He made 2 cherubim of beaten gold. He made them with 1 piece at 2 ends of the mercy seat. One cherub on one end on this side, and the other cherub at the other end on that side. He made the cherubim at the 2 ends of each piece of the mercy seat. The cherubim spread their wings out above and covered the mercy seat with their wings, and they faced one another the faces of the cherubim were toward the mercy seat, okay? So, I went out and got a picture of something that's close. I don't even know if this may not be anything near it, but it's gold.
It's amazing.
It's about that size. I have no idea what cherubim look like, but this artist thought they looked like that. The wings are touching each other. They're pointed out. The heads are looking down. That is an artist's depiction of what he read from this. And I'm just going to give him credit because I don't know. I didn't see. But I do know.
Nobody else seen it.
That's right. But I do know that his cherubim were not 10 foot wide. Okay? Like Solomon pointed out. Okay? Now, as we grow and learn, as we follow Yeshua, and he continues to reveal Yah to us, we learn to pick these little things up. He doesn't reject all that Solomon's doing, not by far. But what he does do, as we're going to get into it, he leads us right down to where his whole plan has been from the beginning. Okay? Now, John mentioned the mercy seat was gone. That's pretty significant. Or it's missing. Okay? Now, why do we believe that it's missing? Because there was no reason to put cherubim above the mercy seat if the mercy seat was still there.
Well, they could look inside and see that there was only 2 tablets in it, so you know there was no lid on it.
That's true. That's another point. Yes, that's another point. So,
Besides that, it wasn't the Ark of the Testament.
what? We'll talk about that more later. Let's stay on the temple today. I'll pick that up next week. I promise to talk more about that next week. So, he has placed it in there. He's doing everything he knows to do. And I do that too. And sometimes what I know to do is way more than Yah told me to do. Have you ever found yourself in that situation? Yeah. Okay. He's doing his best. But there is a significant difference between, well, let me start here. And I'm going to try to work backwards. The mercy seat is gone. The mercy seat was a key point of the first temple. Okay? The mercy seat is missing. It's fair to say that the mercy is missing with it. Okay? So, the mercy seat is missing. It's the covenant, the 2 tablets are still in there.
Not the broken one.
Not the broken ones, okay? Nor is,
No.
now I'm going to stretch you just a little bit here. You're just going to have to go with me and see if this makes sense. If it doesn't, throw tomatoes at me later, okay? Aaron's rod that budded was put in this group with the ark because it represented life after death. Okay?
It was also a witness against the people.
Oh, yes. It had that dual purpose again. The manna, the jar of manna was also, the manna was provision. Yeshua himself said, I am the manna. Okay? Those are missing. Let's think about the time that Solomon was king, and let's just go backwards through some highlight. No, you know what? Let's go forward. Let's go forward from some high side. They get off in the mountain. They wander in the wilderness. Well, they go for a short trip in the wilderness and then decide they want to take the long way. and they end up 40 years in the wilderness, and then they finally get into the land. And Joshua's leading them, and things are going, while Joshua's alive and leading them. And then when Joshua dies, we have the book of Judges. Just looking at the book of Judges, it makes me wonder, when did this lid come up missing? Or when did this ark come up amongst the missing? When did we begin to see, because I don't think it all came off at once, but I think he took his hand away slowly. He brought the judgment in the Judges. He was bringing the judgment consistently, but he was also letting his people be disciplined. You get through the Judges, then you finally get into the first king, and then King David, and now we're at Solomon, okay? It's been a bumpy road the whole time, right down where Yah's leading us. So now, those are significant differences between the tabernacle and the temple. I wanted to point them out, the tabernacle and the first temple. And the first temple, well, let's keep going here. Based on what we've read so far, we already answered these questions. And the mercy seat was the one big answer that I was looking for, okay? So let's go back to 1 Kings 8, verse 10. With all that in mind, we're going to keep going towards the temple, because Yah does put his blessing upon this, okay? And it came to pass, when the priests came out of the holy place, and the cloud filled the house of Yah, so that the priests could not continue ministering because of the cloud. And the glory of Yah filled the house of Yah. Now, the mercy seat was missing, but what did that cloud represent? The presence of Yah. That's the same thing it meant in Sinai, right? Or Horeb, whatever you want to call it.
They let him out.
Now, jump down to verse 20 of chapter 8. So Yah has fulfilled his word which he spoke. And I have filled the position of my father David, and sit on the throne of Israel, as Yah promised. And I have built a temple for the name of Yahweh Elohim of Israel. I want you to catch that. That's mentioned a couple of times, okay? And you'll find, as you go studying through this, Solomon looks at it as the house of Yah's name, because he later on says himself, I don't know if I've listed that verse in here or not, but heaven of heavens can't contain you, much less this temple that I built. So he recognizes that it's way bigger than Yah, okay? But he focuses on the name, and then he begins to, and there I have made a place for the ark, in which is the covenant of Yah, which he made with our fathers when he brought them out of Egypt. Now, I'm not sure, and I'm learning all the time too, so if any of you guys know, or gals know, let me know. I'm not sure why they didn't recognize the significance of the mercy seat being gone. I mean,
Well, that was never a house, it was never a dwelling place. The temple was never a dwelling place. It was for his name, simply his name. The tabernacle was a dwelling place. And when he quit dwelling there, he didn't go and dwell in the temple. He moved his dwelling place back into the heavens, or into the Shamayim.
okay.
And you can read that in Revelation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it was never for a dwelling place. It was only for a house of prayer. If
So
you
they-
read back.
So they looked at it as his presence just being,
Well, his presence, they believed his presence was there.
mhm.
But it doesn't say that it was, and it doesn't show that it was.
Well, it does with the cloud here.
Well, it does. It showed that he sanctified it to that point, but you have to go back to what it says, provided Solomon kept all the covenants that all of his
Yeah,
commandments, or all of his
meaning
instructions.
futuristic,
But
yes.
that was made also for the tabernacle, or for the temple,
Mhm.
right? That was Solomon's temple.
Right.
Do you ever see it called that Yahuwah's temple or Yah's temple?
No.
It's Solomon's temple
Mhm.
until they built the second one.
Okay,
I didn't mean to get you off. But
no, I'm just trying to, I mean, I know they recognized that Yah's presence wasn't with them all the time as they went through the bunch of judges. I mean, maybe they think now that his presence is coming back.
Well, look at, you can see his presence when there was a king that was doing what the Creator
Meaning
wanted him
meaning
to
David,
do.
right.
There was maybe 40 years that those kings were doing his covenants and keeping the people in line, compared to the 80 years or 40 years or 20 years that they had a outside king in there, which was going
Gotcha.
astray.
So it's,
Right?
so it's really similar to what we're seeing kind of today then, because you
Right.
see fingerprints. You see fingerprints all the way through of Yah's fingerprints. You see them back with Ruth
But
headed.
And all the way through the temple, the things that Solomon put in, all the idols and things that he brought in, were never taken out of that temple until the very last king.
Okay.
Before they went into.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing that
Yeah,
out right now.
so-
I'm just showing.
Do you think his presence would be there if those things were there
No.
in the temple? No, but he was with the kings that were doing good works.
Yeah, I wasn't asking why
Oh.
why the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wasn't asking why the mercy seat was gone.
Oh.
I understand that. I was wondering why they don't consider it as big a deal, or maybe they do. Yes.
I think too, they didn't consider it a big deal because it's the whole Ark of the Covenant, they looked at it as a whole. Because the mercy seat is, yes, where God dwelled, but they saw it as like functioning, so God was, they believed at that time when God was just territorial. Remember, remember when it got stolen by the Palestinians?
Right,
So they were
right.
like all discouraged, they were like, our God's left us.
Right.
And they just like sat like alone. And even when King David was supposed to get it, he never did, he left it at that Levite's house. And so
Right.
it was already dysfunction by then.
Right.
And so then when they came in for the first exile and stuff, I mean, they didn't see it as, they looked at the covenant always as one whole. They, you know what I mean, like.
That's what I'm getting at. And I'm trying to understand how it's not whole, and they're looking at it whole, because they're looking at the Ark of the Covenant here, but it's,
They knew what they had.
okay.
Because they had the words of Moses, they must have had the teaching and instructions of Moses, they had the Torah, because he was commanded to write it, and it was put on it was hung on the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
It was set by the Ark of the Covenant. Right?
They sat by it, yeah.
No.
Okay, we gotta get going, because I didn't wanna get hung up, I don't wanna get in those,
Okay,
I don't wanna
alright.
get in those weeds. But,
Table talk.
that was just a thought, looking at and I'm not gonna include you guys, cause I know you guys don't have near the problems I got, but how am I working that same way, thinking I see something that Yah's got going and I'm not even close, you know, so, alright. 1 Kings 8:27 next. Here, I did put it in. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven of heavens cannot contain you. How much less this temple that I have built? Yet, now this is, I believe, why Yah put his presence there. Because of the heart that came from Solomon at this time. Listen to the things he asked. Yet regard the prayer of your servant and his supplication, O Yah, my Elohim, and listen to the cry and the prayer which your servant is praying before you today. Verse 29. That your eyes may be open toward this temple night and day, toward the place which you said, my name shall be there, and that you may hear the prayer which your servant makes toward this place. And may you hear the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. here in heaven, your dwelling place. So here he's acknowledging that's his dwelling place. And when you hear, forgive. When anyone sins against his neighbor or is forced to take an oath and comes and takes an oath before your altar at the temple, then hear in heaven and act and judge your servants, condemning the wicked, bringing his weight on his head, and justifying the righteous by giving them according to his righteousness. When your people Israel are defeated before an enemy because they have sinned against you, and when they turn back to you and confess your name and pray and make supplication to you in this temple, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel and bring them back to the land which you have given their fathers. Verse 35. When the heavens are shut up and there is no rain, because they have sinned against you, and when they pray toward this place and confess your name and turn from their sin, because you afflict them, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your servants, your people Israel, that you may teach them the good way in which they should walk, and send rain on your land, which you have given to your people as an inheritance. Verse 37. When there is famine in the land, pestilence or blight or mildew, locusts or grasshoppers, when the enemy besieges them in the land of their cities, whatever plague or whatever sickness there is, whatever prayer, whatever supplication is made to anyone, or by all your people Israel, when each one knows the plague of his own heart, and spreads out his hands towards the temple, then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and forgive the act, and give to everyone according to all his ways, whose heart you know, for you alone know the hearts of all the sons of men. Verse 40, that they may fear you all the days that they live in the land which you gave their fathers. 41, and concerning a foreigner who is not of your people Israel, but has come from a far country for your name's sake. For they will hear of your great name and your strong hand and your outstretched arm when he comes and prays toward this temple. Hear from heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all of which the foreigner calls to you, that all peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this temple which I have built is called by your name. Verse 44. When your people go out to battle against the enemy, whenever you send them out, and when when they pray to Yah toward the city which you have chosen, and the temple which I have built for your name, then hear from heaven their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. All right, 8 is a long chapter, so I'm gonna jump down to verse 46. I'm going to read verses 46 through 53. 46 through 53. When they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and deliver them to the enemy, and they take them captive to the land of the enemy, far or near, yet when they come to themselves in the land where they are carried captive, and repent, and make supplication to you in the land of those who took them captive, saying, we have sinned and we have done wrong, we have committed wickedness, and when they return to you with all of their heart and with all of their soul, in the land of their enemies, who led them away captive, and pray to you toward their land, which you gave to their fathers, the city which you have chosen, and the temple which I have built for your name, then hear from the heaven, your dwelling place, the prayer and supplication, and maintain their cause. And forgive your people who have sinned against you, and all the transgressions which have transgressed against you, and grant them compassion before those who took them captive, that they may have compassion on them. And where did I say 53? For they are your people and your inheritance, whom you have brought out of Egypt. The iron furnace. I just had a thought. Sorry, I stuttered there. I just had a thought. Okay. That your eyes may be open to the supplication of your servant and the supplication of your people Israel, to listen to them whenever they call on you. For you separated them from among all the peoples of the earth to be your inheritance, as you spoke by your servant Moses, and when you brought our fathers out of Egypt. Now that goes right back to what the whole this whole series has been about, Yah's family. Okay, Solomon's calling out Yah's people. So all of that came from the heart of Solomon as he was praying. All right. Now I want you to go listen to Yah's answer from 2 Chronicles 7, verses 12 through 18. 2 Chronicles 7. Starting in verse 12. Then Yah appeared to Solomon by night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. When I shut up the heaven and there is no rain, or command the locusts, or devour the land, or send pestilence among my people, listen to this. This is often quoted, especially here in the United States on the National Day of Prayer. I want you to listen to this and pay attention to the context in which it's in. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. Verse 15. Now, my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to prayer made in this place. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, that my name may be here forever. And my eyes and my heart will be here perpetually. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David did, and do according to all that I commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom as a covenant with David your father. You shall not fail to have a man as a ruler. Okay, we know Solomon didn't. But did God fail?
No.
Absolutely not, huh? He found another one. He didn't find a new one. He knew where he was at. But he raised another one. And this one did everything. Up to the point of, in the garden, not my will, but your will. In fact, let's back up a couple of words before that. Father, not my will, but your will be done. We have another father-son relationship. This house, we can tie it into John chapter 14. I go to prepare a place, right? He's building that place with the living stones. That's us.
Who's his house?
What's that?
Who's his house?
Mm-hmm.
We are his house.
Right. So, and I'm just pointing that out. Abba never loses focus or control. Even though it might look like chaos all around us, he knows exactly what's going on, and he's completely in control of all of it. That was not meant for you specifically. I did not mention you by name. Let's carry on. As crazy as it sounds, but how many of us, by a show of hands, have lived through those situations where we've seen his fingerprint after the storm blew over? Amen. Amen. All right. What is the role of his people when this happens? In order to get that answer of prayer from Yah. All these things, by the way, because I like tying and weaving these things together and showing that it's all one story, wasn't it somewhere around the end of Deuteronomy that Yah said that this was going to happen? If they didn't listen, he was going to scatter them all over the place? Okay? He didn't break his word then either. Okay? But he told his people, if my people call by my name, right? Now, we see that spoken a lot, and they grab onto that promise around here on National Day of Prayer that they have, but there's a misunderstanding. They don't put it in context. The land that's going to be healed, possible trick question, whose land is it? It's his land. Who'd he give it to? His people, right? So it's that land that's going to be healed. It's not going to be anything other than that land. That's the land that's going to be healed. And it's healed on behalf of those he promised it to. All right. Next week, John, bring a big stick because we're going to stir some stuff up next week. And then I want to look at some differences as we look down the path. The overview was like the tabernacle, Solomon's temple, now the second temple. I want to look at that. And you'll see degradation all the way through it. Okay? But I want to point some things out, and then, I'm not going to get into Ezekiel's temple. I just want to keep moving through here because we got to get to that separation. I have, what is that called? I have a sample. I have what is the word I'm looking for? Object. I have an object lesson or something. I got to get to it when we split. When the house of Israel split from the house of Judah. I got something to show y'all. I said I would. I'm going to make sure I do it. So, what's that?
I said the northern tribe split from Yehuda because they're part of Israel too, the house of Israel. But we know what you mean.
I know. You have to put it in context, huh? Scripture's that way too. You can read something in two different places and may not have the same words because it's not the same audience or whatever. So anyway, that's where we're going next, and we're going to get through that. We do have some things to discuss with those two things, and that should get us. We're going to bounce from there right to the end of Solomon's life because I want to show you Yah's hand at the end of Solomon's life, going into Jeroboam's life. Okay, Rehoboam. I mean, Jeroboam was the other one.
Jeroboam was the servant.
Right, right. Rehoboam was Solomon's son. Yeah. So that's where we're headed. It has taken me like 35 years to get to this point. I have been waiting to get to this point because it explains so much to so many different people when they better understand this particular part. Understanding who Yah's people are is critical to understanding the scripture. Okay?
John, if I might just make one comment.
Sure.
As I studied this out years ago, I came to the conclusion, and many of you have heard me say this already, the temple is not the tabernacle is not the temple. Two different things have two different purposes. The temple was mainly for prayer, pure and simple. You read those.
Why Yeshua said it was his
Yeah,
father's house.
exactly.
Right.
When you get to that point, when he's turning the tables, this was to be a house of prayer.
Right.
And so, that ties all of that together too.
Right.
But the temple is not the tabernacle is not the temple.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Does any?
No, you don't wanna hear him say that. You don't wanna hear him say that.
I can talk about stones or the ark, and I can have him mumbling for an hour and a half, and he'll still say stuff too, and still mumbles. You know I'm half deaf, so. All right. Does anybody else have a question or a comment or a concern or something they'd like to add to? All right. So if that's the case, now it's. Are you?
No, I was.
All right, now it's time to,
Prepare us to receive the blessing.
thank you, sir.